Hi YouTube, welcome back to my channel, So Fast I Young. I'm Morgan, and today we're going to talk a little bit about pattern matching. So I have a video of how I pattern matched the center back seam on my Gunne Sax dress, which ended up being the only seam I ended up pattern matching on that Gunne Sax dress. I didn't have to pattern match the front because I put the muslin and the lace there. The side seams, I kind of lined them up a little bit, but again, it was underarm. There's nothing with the skirt, like the way that the skirt pattern was, you really couldn't pattern match that. And it's a very busy print, so. But I did, because it's the most noticeable spot, make the center back seam pattern line up pretty well. So, and I think that's the big thing. A lot of people think in pattern matching, they're like, oh, I'm going to pattern match. I need to match every point in the pattern, and you can't do that. Like, you can match a lot of points, but you can't always match every single point, like, and make seams completely disappear. Because I mean, there's multiple reasons why. Like, sometimes you get really lucky and you get a lot of stuff that sort of matches and flows together. But in some patterns, like, it won't happen. So pattern matching, like, to me, the most important part is to figure out where it's going to be most visible on a garment. Like, is it going to be most visible if is there like a horizontal pattern that you need to match, and you want to make sure that, like with a plaid, you know, you got your horizontal lines going this way. Is it going to matter if you have a vertical that perfectly matches or not? Like, sometimes you also want that. You want, like, if you've got a very straight center front seam, you might want to pattern match that very precisely. But as soon as you start getting into pieces that have curves, there's only so much of that curve that you can pattern match to the opposing curve. For me, a lot of times I focus on like the like bust point, because across the bust, that's the widest, that's the most noticeable, or like across the upper chest, like, and I try to get that, especially because, like, if you think about it, when you've got a piece of fabric and you've got a dart in it, like, the pattern over here and the pattern over here is never going to match the same way that the pattern right in the center does. So, like, and you also still want to be able to maintain the grain line on your fabric, so you can't just willy-nilly cut to match as many points as possible, and then like destroy your grain line, because that could cause all sorts of other problems. That could cause fitting problems if grain line fits differently on one side than the other or whatnot, you know. So generally with pattern matching, I try to pick what is going to be most visually like assertive. Like, what am I gonna, I'm looking at this pattern, I'm looking at this on a dress, what am I gonna see that needs to be lined up? You tend to notice the horizontal stripes on a plaid more than you tend to notice, like, if the vertical stripes were like perfectly matched all the way along, like, type thing. So I do want to do a little shout out to Little House Hippie on Instagram. They're the person that contacted me with some questions about pattern matching and prompted me to make this video. So hi, and I hope this video helped answer some of your questions about pattern matching. Yeah. So first, let's go ahead and take a look at how I pattern matched the back of my Gunne Sax dress. And again, this is just one method. There are multiple methods, multiple ways of doing it. This is how I do it a lot. It's the method that makes sense in my brain. And I think the big thing with pattern matching, and I think I'll say it again in this clip, is you need to figure out what in your brain makes sense with pattern matching and how to do it. So, because not everybody looks at the situation the same way. Like, there's different ways to problem solve it. And there is, like with most things, there is no one true way. No one true way. True way, yeah. There are lots of different methods of doing this. So again, this is just mine, and I do talk about a couple other little, like, ideas in here too. So let's start with that. Just for a second, I want to talk about the pattern on this particular fabric. It definitely has a direction. These flowers, while they look similar to these, are definitely different. Like, I can't reverse this. It would look different. So I'm going to really pay attention to the grain line, not the grain line, yeah, the pattern direction. There's a couple different ways that one can pattern match. A lot of it has to do with, for me at least, what the pattern is. If I have an organic, more organic pattern like this, if I have a very repetitious pattern that is more geometric or has like, you know, if I have a pattern that has like lines or like a very specific design, like grid or diamonds, or if it's a brocade or something that's a little more easily recognizable as a pattern, or versus sometimes when things are a little more organic like this one is. When I have a more organic pattern like this, and particularly depending on where exactly I'm considering lining things up, I actually like to, so I actually already cut one copy of this panel. And then I pressed it back where my zipper is going to go. Now, this is great if I don't move my zipper line. If I don't make any alterations through my zipper, we're fine. So then I will usually use that. I will press it back and use that to line up and find where my other side is going to be. And then I will mark this line here somehow. This is where disappearing ink comes in really handy, particularly if you need to mark on the outside of the garment. So you can make some marks so that you know exactly where this fold is going to be. One of the nice things about not having the seam allowance means I can literally place this pattern right at that point, line it up, get it lined up about where it needs to be for the bottom, and then just cut it out from the side. You can also do it from the back side. It's a little bit harder sometimes to match the pattern. I like doing it from the front where I can see. Another way that one can do it is, oh, this is going to be harder. Let me put you on the tripod really quick. Because another way that you can do it where you get this all nice and lined up, make sure you're hitting those points very, very carefully. Fold it back, and again, we're going to check it this way, this direction. It should come out the same. So these should be the continuation of the pattern. So you should be able to get that, and then you can fold this. And now you can cut this. And just use your first pattern piece, or your first cut piece, as your pattern for your second cut piece. That's another great way to do it. Makes it really easy. You should get everything perfectly matched up. Bam. Okay. Another way to do it, like when I do have patterns that are more repetitious, if it's something that I can mark and be like, okay, here and here is the top and bottom of a diamond that I'm lining up. Like if I make little marks, like, you know, so like say this was, it was like a Harlequin pattern or something, I could actually physically, or even physically draw a little bit of whatever the pattern is so that I can find the correct corresponding matching part. I feel like pattern matching is something that every individual needs to work their own brain around, because some people function better with certain visual cues than others. And then it also doesn't help that like green is not completely perfect or anything. Sometimes prints warp as they are. That's part of why it's important to wash and press your fabric, So you're less likely to have a warped print, but sometimes that does happen. I have cut fabric where the print was very warped and very hard to properly match up. Then a lot of times you gotta kind of just play with what looks visually right after the fact. So, but anyways, I'm gonna cut out this other half of my back. Okay, so now that we've pattern matched the back of this, I just wanted to insert this little clip here and talk about the center front of the skirt, because there's a good tip here about just making sure you're actually reading what your patterns are saying. So we'll do that and then move on from there. I'm sitting here trying to figure out how to cut out this front skirt piece, like how I wanted to lay it out, when I had a thought, and then I decided to double check my pattern, because my pattern says place center front on a fold. Now, there's a reason why I was confused about this. Okay, so this particular, like how this is done right here, is different than what I am used to in modern patterns. In modern patterns, usually there's no size difference here. Like it's all added that way. Usually there's not that. And usually there's a line that kind of comes down and around and has little arrows so that it's very clear that this is a fold. So I just needed to read my pattern better. So I'm cutting this on a fold. That makes much more sense than having a seam down the center front. And yeah, so that's the pattern piece. It's just the back side. Just happens to be the way that I folded the fabric. So that means I'm also going to need to put a mark on here to remind myself for the future that this needs to be on a fold. But yeah, like I've never and this is sometimes vintage patterns, they just did some things differently. Like super old vintage patterns had no markings whatsoever on them. They maybe just had notches and that was it. So I had never seen it done this way before, where there was I just assumed this was seam allowance and I didn't really look or read. So now I know. That's good to know. So I'm gonna make a mark over on that pattern that's on the floor after I get done cutting it out. So, yeah, these things. So the next set of clips are going to be some garments and fabrics that I have that I felt would be good to talk about when talking about pattern matching. We have an up close of the shirt. We have a pattern that I would choose another method of placement over pattern matching. We have a very geometric pattern that I want to show you guys, just to sort of look at and talk about the different options of how to match that pattern there. Then I have a dress that I made that is a bad example of pattern matching, though, well, I mean, it was my fault, but it was avoidable, and I talk about why it was avoidable. And then I have one of my personal favorite moments of pattern matching in my recent sewing years. So, yeah. So let's get So let's go ahead and talk about those things. Here is an example of a very busy pattern that I personally would never bother trying to match anywhere. It's just got enough going on that I would never have tried to match stuff with this lap or anything. This doesn't have a center back seam, but I just thought I'd give you an example of a pattern that I would never match. Fabric pattern that I would also never match, unless I was doing something very specific. More likely with this one, because of how big these gals are, this one I would cut based on placement of the individual women on this. I would actually place my patterns so that I get the most faces and poses and whatnot. So I would worry less about matching patterns and more about capturing the cool zombies because they're so cute, and I just want as many full ones as I could. If I was doing a bodice, I'd probably pick one on each side instead of trying to match lines. This is the type of geometric pattern I probably would go a little bit crazy trying to match up. My suggestion would be to pay attention to sort of a row of these and make sure that those are all lined up when you get into anything with darts or like curved seams, that's like you need to pick what's most prominent. So like I would probably do bust line type thing and then let everything else fall as it could, and then try to line up as best as possible. But there's just too many like variables. So with stuff like this, I look kind of at like a line across the body, or if I have very strong like center straight seams anywhere, I look for making sure that that sort of stuff is lining up. This is an example of an unfortunate problem I had. This is a dress that I made, and this is a full circle skirt in the back, I think. I cut, it was a dress. It's got a bodice up here. This is the back of it. I cut this bodice piece before I cut the circle skirt. And when I went to go cut the circle skirt, I did not have enough wiggle room in any which way in order to shift it to line these patterns up. This was the best I could do, was offset them. And I didn't even offset them great, honestly. So this is what not to try to do, but I had to pick something to do. So this unfortunately does not line up at all. And as much as I love this dress in one way, I also hate it because of that. Same dress. See, the best that I could do because of that was actually make these kind of line up, but they didn't even really. That was sort of my hope. And that was actually on accident. But yeah, even in the center front, they don't match perfectly. Except for this one right here, because that was the bodice that was on the fold. So it, of course, lined up right. Yeah, and that's really just, I learned my lesson here, so I always cut my biggest or hardest pieces to line up first now, and then kind of work everything else as best I can. My Halloween dress from a few years ago, and this is my best pattern matching to date. Well, I mean, maybe not my best, but it's pretty awesome. So this is the top. This is on a fold, okay? This fabric you can see how directional this fabric is and this pattern, okay? The pattern repeated, but it didn't mirror itself, actually. So because of the width of the fabric and the length of the skirt, when you come down to the skirt, my pattern is matched perfectly. However, you can tell where the seam is because this was literally the only way that I could match the pattern based on the fabric and the fact that it didn't the repetition of this pattern was not one that there was absolutely no possible way to match the colors here and here. So it's continuous. But it's just really funny because it literally, like, if you don't notice the color variation, I did such a good job of matching every single inch of this pattern all the way down. Like, they are all perfectly mirrored, they just happen to be different colors. And I'm actually really proud of this because the seam almost disappears until you realize that there's two color variations. And like I said, because this pattern is so big and the fabric, I think the fabric was 36. I don't even think it was 44. Like if I had moved this over to this bat, I wouldn't have had enough space to do the skirt. This was like to do the length of the skirt. So yeah, this was a pretty cool one. And literally the only option of how to do this. So, and then the rest of the pieces on it didn't really get matched because of the angles of, I actually had to end up adding, because this was originally a 3/4 skirt on a fold was how it was supposed to be cut. But I ended up having to add side seams to edit the pattern. Also because I didn't want these back pieces to be completely upside down. This is another like really cute vintage wrap dress thing. Hold on, let me turn it over. It does this cute crisscross wrap in the back. You can see my messy cutting table. So this is the back. It's got like this cute crisscross, but I didn't want these guys upside down. I really wanted the pattern to stay more directional, so I cut it in pieces. And it's great because actually the angle that I ended up keeping on this piece ends up being very similar to the angle that's on the center back pieces. So I hope that this video has given you all some food for thought about pattern matching and how to go about it. Like I said, there's definitely not one correct way to do it, and a lot of it has to do with visual appeal at the end of the day. So what you feel needs to be matched is what you think needs to be matched, you know, or how you want to do it. I don't think there's a right or a wrong way to go about matching patterns on a garment. I will definitely be continuing to touch on pattern matching in future videos as the situations come up. I have plans for, actually at some point, it's sitting over there staring at me. I have a red buffalo plaid taffeta that I want to do a circle skirt out of, and so that video is definitely going to have pattern matching involved. But yeah, it'll definitely be more of like a per project basis. It might be, you know, inside videos, just like before I had when I did the stripes on the Little Red Riding Hood bodice. I had a section in one of the video, or two sections in the videos, talking about figuring out how I was going to match up the stripes because it needed to be different front and back because there was shoulders that I wanted matched up. That's another place where you can think about matching, is shoulder stripes. And then, like I had, there was a center back panel that had curves. So I talk about both of those in one of those videos. I'll put a link somewhere up here for that, that particular video that talks about the matching of those stripes. Yeah, there's a lot of different ways that you can handle pattern matching. And so, you know, just don't be afraid. Don't go into it thinking that it's going to be something hard. Like, it can be easy. Like, it can be as hard as you make it, or it can be as easy as you choose to make it. I accidentally once matched patterns on a coat just by choosing to line the pattern all up at the same point. Like, you know, like it was a weird fluke. It was a really tiny check pattern, and we had decided that the pattern matching didn't matter, but then when I was sewing it together, it all ended up matching anyways. So, like, sometimes you just do it automatically without even realizing it. Yeah, patterns can be like complicated, but it like, you don't need to overthink it, is I think what I'm trying to say. Like, you just need to do it or like pick a simple way to match. Because horizontal is almost always more noticeable to me than other things that are off. And like perfectly matching up like a pattern like can be pretty, but again, like I said, you kind of need to pick the places to do it. Center back seams are really like good places. Like I said, the bust area, sometimes shoulder seams, back panels, skirt piecing is kind of, it really depends on the skirt actually. Like, oh, if you've got a pencil skirt, like the horizontal on a pencil skirt is probably going to be more important than like trying to match the verticals on the side seams. Like, so you would want to make sure that you're matching horizontal lines or something rather than like, say a vertical pattern that's going to match all the way down, especially if it's any pencil skirt that's got like tapered in, or an alien skirt that flared out. Like, you're not gonna, like, it's going to be really hard to match those unless you're chevroning stuff, and that's a different thing. And I mean, chevroning pattern matching is also important too when you get into certain types of stuff and cuts. And then you, like, yeah, you just have to sort of think and plot stuff out to start with, and you'll end up, you know, with something that looks good in the end. Also, taking time to either cut single layers, like I believe I said it, when I'm pattern matching, I like to cut individual layers instead of trying to cut two layers. And again, that comes back to what I was talking about with patterns possibly like warping. So lesser quality fabric, sometimes when it's run through the mills, like especially if it's a printed pattern, sometimes it can warp, and you'll get like weird things going on. So yeah, just always kind of make sure that your pattern is actually as straight as you think it is. I have run across some stuff where patterns have ended up being really like wonky, and on a fabric, depending on the weave and the quality and all that stuff. So you just have to really pay attention. It gets an attention to detail, but it's not like the end of the world either. So you can't like don't over like. I know I keep saying pay attention, but don't overthink it. And I mean that's the thing, is you have to pay attention, but you can't overthink it, because then you're just gonna like put yourself in this state of, oh my god, it doesn't match perfectly. And it's like, well, then it doesn't match perfectly, or you just go in and you tweak it so that it does match perfectly. So please remember to like and subscribe to my channel. Leave me some comments. I do love hearing from you all, and I love answering questions or just talking about cool things that y'all have done, or if you have questions about things that I've done. Please feel free to reach out to me. Check out my links in all my links. So, you know, I have an Instagram, I have a TikTok now, I have my Tumblr, which is like where I post a lot of random stuff. So go ahead, check that out. Come search me out and let's be friends. More sewing buddies, there's always good. Yeah. I hope you all have a wonderful week. I love you all.